Ciao ragazzi e bentornati, questo è Italy Made Easy, io sono Manu e questo è l'episodio 20 di Ask Manu Italiano, episode 20. Can't believe how quickly this all happened. 20 episodes, that means 20 weeks that we've been together and I've been answering your questions, and today we have another really common one. I'm not going to talk about grammar or anything like that. It's a kind of like a light topic, but it will help so many of you, probably everybody. For that, I encourage you to go to the website to read the full blog post. There is no PDF to download for today's lesson. You'll see why in a minute. I'll just give tips and stuff like that, so there's no exercises. Sorry guys, we've just lost one of the lights. It exploded almost on my face. I'm alive. La domanda.
Ciao Manu, my name is Alan. I'm living in Italy. I've been here for over a year now. I'm trying to learn Italian. I love your videos. They're really helpful. My big problem is when Italians come to speak to me, I freeze, I panic. I try to guess what they're saying. Is there any way around this? Can you give me any help to know how better to understand what they're saying to me? Because when I understand, I can actually reply. Thanks for your help. Bye.
I told you that today's topic was going to be one that you would definitely want to hear because, be honest, have you not had this problem? You haven't. If you haven't, it's because you haven't been to Italy, so you haven't been faced with the fear that gets you when you're in a foreign country trying to speak the new language that you've just learned, that you've been working on. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter if you've been working on it for a month, 6 months, a year, or 20, it's always like that. Recently, I had the opportunity to speak French, and let me tell you, I could have used this advice. So let's look at it together and see what can we do when we are scared of speaking. And what happens is we do freeze, meaning one, we stop understanding even things that we're supposed to understand, and then we are not able to produce the language that in other situations we would. For example, when we're driving and we're talking to ourselves, or when we are showering. We're pretty good in Italian, aren't we? So, I only, obviously, because it's not a grammar topic, I only have ideas, suggestions, stuff like that. Let's have a look. The first thing I would recommend you do is prepare for situations. So, for example, if you're about to go to a specific shop, let's say you're going to a furniture shop looking for a couch. Well, before you go, look up expressions and vocabulary that you know is going to come up. For example, design, the fabric, the pattern, the warranty, all things that you would think would be relevant to buying a couch. They might ask you what color floor it has to match, what kind of wallpaper. Some people still have wallpaper. It has to match, stuff like that. So be prepared for the situation so that when you're there, you're less anxious about not understanding because at least you have the vocabulary and you've got an idea of the things that are likely to come up. If you're going to a jewelry shop, well, do you know the words for silver, gold, platinum, ring, earrings, all the things that you're wanting to buy? Be prepared. Otherwise, it's just difficult. And this is something that we can do in advance. So it's just going to reduce the anxiety a little bit, just a little bit. Every tip I'm going to share with you is going to help you reduce the anxiety just a little bit. It's not going to make it easy, but hopefully easier. Okay, now, this is something that we forget to do as speakers of a foreign language. I put myself in this. We forget to preempt our level of Italian. As we are engaging with people, it's not wrong to let them know, hey, look, I speak Italian, but not too much. You could say something like, scusi, io parlo italiano, ma non troppo bene. O parlo un po' di italiano, per favore, può parlare lentamente. Whatever, so I speak a little bit of Italian, could you please speak slowly? So whatever way you have to let them know that, yes, they can speak Italian to you, but hoy, don't go too crazy, right? So yeah, preempt your level, let them know what your level is, okay? And there's nothing bad about telling them that you're not excellent in their language. They're happy that you're speaking a little bit of their language, so yeah, let's do that. Next step is understand that some scenarios are just difficult. They are intrinsically difficult. Speaking on the phone is just difficult. There are times when I still don't want to pick up the phone and make that phone call where I have to explain stuff. And it happens. The telephone is a little hard. Crowds are hard. So, speaking, if you're at a table with a bunch of Italians, it's a lot harder for you to keep up. It's just inevitable. For many reasons. One, it's, the noise, the background noise, all the voices at the same time, all the words that you don't know at the same time, but also the dialects. If you're at a table with a bunch of Italians, chances are they all speak with a little bit of an accent, and some will throw in words from the dialect because they're all Italian, so they can use the dialect. Now, if they're considerate, they shouldn't, but let's be honest. You're the only non-Italian, so probably they will use a little bit of the dialect, right? Because they're trying to have a conversation with friends. So, some situations are intrinsically difficult. Here I have a few more. And other situations that are difficult are whenever you're dealing with lines. Why? Because it's a high-paced environment. You're lining up and there are people behind you, so the person serving you doesn't really have the patience for you to even tell them, look, my Italian is not good, can you speak slowly? They don't have time, come on. So those situations are going to be scarier, and you can do everything you can to avoid them. For example, if you want to buy a train ticket, buy it from a vending machine. Buy it from not the main station, but the local station, like the little one where there's not a huge line and people are more likely to be friendly and have more time for you. Okay, so yeah, some situations you just either avoid or know that it's going to be difficult. Finally, remember what your goal is in speaking Italian to these people. It's usually communication. It's not perfection. They're not your teachers. We have this imprinting training in our brain that, because we do a lot of our learning through the schooling system, the university, the college, whatever, we have this idea that everybody's judging us. If you learned a language with a language teacher, then they probably were assessing you and grading you. This doesn't happen in life, obviously. But we seem to have that memory, the cellular memory that we gotta be perfect, because if we stuff up an article, if I say il zaino instead of lo zaino, which is the correct one for the backpack, oh my god, okay, it's nothing. They're still understood that you're talking about a backpack, it's no big deal. So remembering that your goal is to be able to communicate with these people should, again, lessen the anxiety a little bit. But here are some practical tips. It's not just all theoretical. I'm not that much about just the theory. So what can we practically do? Well, we should focus more on non-verbal cues. So when people speak to you, they are not behind a black wall and you can't see them, and they're not like with their hands tied up. So what happens in communication is that they will have non-verbal cues telling you what's going on. The tone of voice, the pitch, the speed, the volume, but also their hands. They'll be pointing at certain things. When people speak, especially Italians, even though it's not the stereotypical thing that some people think, but yes, we use hands. We talk about the things that we use our hands to kind of describe the things that we're talking about a lot. But also communication happens in a setting. So don't forget that whatever is around you is part of the communication. And so you may not know the word for the new thing that they're talking about, but it should be obvious from how they're talking about it and which way they're looking. So yeah, don't forget this. Don't forget this. We often do. Focus on the context. So if you know that you're in a certain situation, what is likely to be said? That's kind of related to the first thing that I said, like prepare for a situation. For example, if, let's say you see a friend and they're riding the bike and they see you and they stopped and they, maybe they start talking to you on the bike, are they likely to tell you something about their bike situation thing? Probably. So expect something to do with the bike. That's just a terrible example, but you see what I'm saying? The context comes with vocabulary and also with phrases and things that are going to be said about that situation. If you see somebody and they have a really cute little dog and you look at the dog and you smile, don't you think what they're about to tell you has to do with the dog. Probably it does. You know, they might say, oh, don't you think it's really cute? Or would you like to pet it? You know, some kind of things along those lines. There's no point in me telling you the words in Italian. I'm not teaching you the actual words for anything today. This is trying to help you and everybody else, including myself, relax more when we have to speak a foreign language. In your case, it's Italian. In my case, it's all the other ones that I try to speak. Focus on vocabulary. Now you might say, of course. No, we don't. We don't, because we try to understand everything. Now, I don't know your level of Italian and, you know, anybody else's. But no matter how good your level is, there will always be things that you don't know, words that you don't know. Of course, as you progress, that number is going to get smaller, but yes, there will be things that you don't know. And so you can't really focus on everything. You can't try and understand everything. So when people talk to you, start talking to you, try and find the words that you do identify. It's not always easy even doing that, because that word that you know is probably merged inside 2 or 3 other words. You know, like, you know, you might know the word for libro, but then they might say il mio libro è, like my book is. But then libro has kind of disappeared inside that thing. So try and focus on the words, because when you have the context, so the things that you can expect them to say, when you've prepared for the situation, if it's a situation that you can prepare for, obviously, when you put all these things together and you try and find basically the keywords. So if somebody is talking to you and you're looking at them, you can see their entire demeanor, you can see what they're doing, you can see how they're saying things, you can see if they're positive or negative about it. You can see a lot more when you don't focus just on the language. And then all you do is pick up the keywords, so you can make up a story that is probably right. You know, let's say you go to a bookshop because you are looking for a certain book, and you ask them what book it is, and then they have to interact with you, and you know, they might say a lot of things, they might speak fast, they might do everything that you hate. But as long as you're able to detect the words, for example, like ordinare, I don't know if you know the words, obviously, but ordinare, deposito, dopodomani. If you know that ordinare means to order, deposito means a deposit, and dopodomani means the day after tomorrow, you can probably make up a story that they need to order the book because they don't have it in store, that you need to pay a deposit, and then the book will be there the day after tomorrow. So I know I'm making it's not as simple as this, obviously, but see what I'm saying? So focus on the vocabulary. What are the words that you do know? But what are the words that you can assume from the context? You know, you may not know the word for this, but people are not going to talk about this totally out of the blue. They might be talking to you about their camcorder, that's a camcorder, but you know, they might be talking about their TV, the DVD player, whatever they're talking about. That's what's going to bring in this object. Or it's physically there. They might say, could you please pass me the thing? They're pointing, you're watching TV together, you just said that you don't like the show, what could they be saying? So even if you don't know the word for telecomando, that's it, you should be able to relax and understand it from the context, because you can assume that word from the context. But also there are words that you can guess because they're very similar to English. Again, out of the blue, that would be hard, but in a context, a certain word that is English can be a certain word in Italian can be kind of guessed in English in a specific context. For example, let's say that I've just told you about a really cool racconto, short story by Italo Calvino, probably can't say it, and you'd like to have it, and then I say in this context, okay, te lo fotocopio. Who? Well, fotocopio, in this context, it's more obvious than it means to photocopy because it sounds the same in English, or it sounds the same as English. Now, this one is a very important one. Focus on the beginning of the verbs. Now, in Italian, we have a bunch of tenses. You may not know all of them. I'm talking about verbal tenses. And sometimes they're just hard to detect because people speak fast. So don't try to, because you're here, you're trying to understand what they're saying so that you don't panic, right? The reason you panic is that you fear that you may not understand, and then you look like a fool, which you never do really, but we think we do. But don't try and understand if somebody just said mangerò, avrò mangiato, mangerei, mangiavo, mangiassi. These are different tenses of the verb mangiare, to eat. So, if you try, now of course you might say, but then I'm not understanding what they're saying. Yeah, I know, hold on. If your focus is to say, do I know what they're talking about? You have the vocabulary, which are the keywords. If you focus on the beginning of the verb, the beginning is always the one that tells you what verb they're using. So, while there is a huge difference between mangerei and mangerò, one is I would eat and the other one is I will eat. Or mangiavo, which means I was eating. It doesn't matter what it is. If you can detect that they're talking about mangiare, you will feel a lot more relaxed because you at least understood what thing they did to what, because you got the vocabulary. The context should, in many cases, fill in the blanks, the parts that you're not quite sure. Okay? And again, oftentimes it's not that important that you understand exactly whether they will eat or they would eat. There are other things in the sentence will suggest whether they would eat or they will eat. Other things will suggest that. Okay, so focus on the beginning of the verb because that's going to tell you what they're talking about. And then you might be able to kind of figure out the rest. Finally, there's a big one. Don't be bogged down by the prepositions, the particles, and the pronouns. There's too many. They're too difficult sometimes. So if you try and say, okay, hold on, he just said chi. What kind of chi is that? I have a great episode explaining all the possible meanings of chi, or most of them. You don't want to go crazy trying to understand what chi did they say. Just skip it over. Just probably you'll be able to understand anyway. That was a particle. Preposition, yes, while it makes a difference to be on or in or at, but again, the context will fill it in. So don't let those things keep you from understanding because you're panicking. Other particles are part of a verb, like, you have verbs like andarsene, me ne vado. Me ne vado means I'm out of here. But you hear me, so you think it's about me. You hear ne, which means you think it must mean of it, because that's what ne usually means. And vado means I go. It means nothing, then you're behind. Look at the context. If somebody says me ne vado and they get up and go, you are safe to assume that they're leaving. And that vado kind of meant I'm going, right? So don't let this confuse you too much. Now, pronouns, that's a big one. Italian has direct pronouns, indirect pronouns, like so many pronouns, right? Reflexive pronouns. Think about it. Anything that is about me, we use the word me, am I. Anything that is about you, we say the word ti. Whether it means to you, for you, yourself, it doesn't matter, it's going to be ti. Anything that's about us, it's going to be chi. Anything that's about you guys, it's going to be vi. Now, they are different in the third person, which could happen that they're talking to you in the third person, obviously. But then you can still kind of make sense from the other stuff. So don't let these things slow you down and put you in that state of panic. Now, I know that I don't know how much this was helpful for you. I hope that one of the tips kind of helped you know that you can relax a bit more when people approach you. I think the big one for me would be the goal of this is communication, not perfection. That's a big one for me. And then another one would be, but I'm pretty good at this. I'm really good at this, is the guessing, is the using the context and the non-verbal cues to kind of make up a story. And in fact, even though I've never really conversed in French, in my recent experience, I understood probably 90-95% of what my friend was saying to me. I just wasn't able to respond because I haven't used it in so long, but I'm working on it. So I hope this encourages you and gives you a little bit of hope. And good on you for living in Italy, by the way, Alan. Once again, my website is italymade-easy.com, where you can find a bunch of other things and all my other videos and PDFs and blah blah blah. And if you like this video, I do ask you to give it a thumbs up. It really helps. Leave a comment. Let's interact and let's talk about stuff like this, because we're trying to build a community of Italian learners, aren't we? And if you need to catch up on all the other episodes of Ask Manu Italiano, you have the playlist over here. Ok? Ciao ciao ragazzi! Ragazzi, per non perdere nessuna lezione di italiano, attivate le notifiche. Si fa così. Prima vi iscrivete al canale, poi fate clic sulla campana vicino al bottone rosso e selezionate quest'opzione. Salvate e via! Facile, no? Yeah, let's... Oh my god, this episode is a mess. Ah, mio Dio! Ok.